A canine dog was ordered to charge at an old man, but what happened next brought everyone to tears. Sun glazed the playground in gold, while a low breeze carried laughter past the swings. A chalk hopscotch faded toward the benches where an elderly man, James Carter, sat with a scuffed canvas bag tucked by his shoe, gaze pinned to some distant place no one else could see. Emma counted her kids, Lily, Sam, then felt the hairs on her arms rise without knowing why. A radio crackled. Officers Hayes and Ruiz entered from different paths, voices calm but clipped. "Sir, open the bag." James nodded, then stalled, fingers trembling at the zipper. Warm light, long shadow. The pause felt wrong. A cruiser drifted to the curb, lights dark, engine ticking. Doors shut in unison. Officer Daniels stepped out with a German Shepherd at heel, Rex head high, ears razor sharp. Parents drew closer to their children. Phones tilted up. Someone whispered, "What's in there?" "Final request," Daniel said. No movement. James swallowed, tried to stand, winced, sat back down. The playground noise thinned to a thin wire of sound. Rex stared, tail rigid, breath quiet, muscles ready. Daniels braced, leash short. "On me." The command landed like a dropped stone. "Charge." Rex surged. Paws slapped pavement. Strollers scraped. A scooter clattered down. Hayes shifted left to block a line of escape that no one believed the old man would take. Ruiz radioed, engaging K9. Heartbeats counted seconds nobody owned. James lifted his palm, shaking, empty, pleading, and whispered something too soft for most ears. Emma heard only the first consonant, and felt a memory tug, though she had never met him. Rex froze mid-stride. A strangled whine leaked into sunlight. Children stopped moving. Hayes's hand hovered near his holster. Daniels blinked, frowned, and said nothing. Rex took one hesitant step forward, not to attack, but to smell James's sleeve. What single word halts a trained canine like a wall, and why does an old man carry it like a secret key? Morning came bright and simple. The bakery bell on Main Street chimed. The barber rolled his awning up, and sprinklers ticked across tidy lawns. By 9 the park gathered its usual crowd. Strollers clicked. Coffee lids popped. The pond flashed silver where ducks cut lazy wakes. On the swings Lily flew high while Sam counted aloud, promising a perfect jump if she hit his mark. Their laughter stitched the paths together. On a bench near the maple, James Carter lowered himself with care, his coat too heavy for the warmth, showed frayed cuffs and a bleached collar. A tattered canvas bag leaned against his shoe. His hands, nicked and steady only when still, folded over each other, then opened as if waiting for an instruction that wouldn't come. He watched the pond the way someone listens for a distant engine. People passed, glanced, and moved on. He looked like any tired traveler. Emma spread a blanket in the shade, kept the swings in sight and checked knees for scrapes. Lily asked for a push. Sam obliged with theatrical gusto. Emma smiled, then noticed the man by the bench. Something about his stare skipped the present like a stone, not threatening. Off. She shrugged it away, texted a quick hello to her partner and tucked the phone face down on the blanket. 3 blocks away, a patrol car drifted past a mural of the town team hoisting a trophy. Inside, officers Hayes and Ruiz listened to dispatch. Suspicious older male near the playground. Unknown intent. Caller gone. No details, only caution. Hayes tapped the map and said they were close. Ruiz nodded, scanning sidewalks through habit, spotting reflections in windows and noting angles before they mattered. They parked without lights and approached from different paths, a practiced move that preserved space and options. Hayes walked with open hands and relaxed shoulders. Ruiz let his focus sweep the gazo, the bathroom doors, the ice cream cart humming beside a cooler, the curve of the pond's edge. He clocked a birthday table under bunting, a hot dog cart and the bench by the maple. Small things mattered, shade lines, foot traffic where a stroller could snap. Hayes stopped a few paces from the bench. "Good morning, sir," he said, voice neutral, friendly. "Everything all right today?" James blinked as if returning from a long hallway. He nodded once. Ruiz studied the bag, stained canvas, frayed zipper, a rubbed tag that might have held a name. "Sir, we need to see your bag," Hayes added, careful with tone. "We had a call." The words landed firmly but without heat. James touched the zipper and paused. "I'm just resting," he said, voice thin. apology folded inside. A soccer ball rolled against the bench and made him flinch. He exhaled, steadying himself, and tried the zipper again. It didn't move. Emma tugged her blanket's corner and told Lily and Sam to stay close. Around them the park performed ordinary life. A whistle from the court, stroller wheels squeaking, a dog barking at geese, the vendor tapping tongs against a steel tray, yet the soundscape thinned near the bench. People pretended not to watch while absolutely watching. Ruiz pressed his shoulder mic and gave location, posture and crowd notes. Dispatch acknowledged. Hayes crouched a little to block the glare. If you open it we can clear this up and you can enjoy the day, he said. James set his hand, missed the pull, tried again. The tremor turned a simple task into work. The bag remained closed. A K-9 unit rolled in from the far lot. Officer Daniels stepped out and opened the rear door. A German shepherd dropped to the pavement with controlled energy, black and tan, eyes bright. Rex's presence shifted the air. Conversations softened. Daniels took the read quickly. 2 officers, 1 older male, growing attention, no overt threat, rising tension because of time. Daniels set Rex in a downstay beside him and asked, "What we got?" Hayes gave the short version. Anonymous call, request to view contents, cooperative subject with trouble handling the bag. Ruiz added, crowd building, posture calm, flinch to sudden contact. Daniels nodded, palm hovering above the harness, attention toggling between the dog, the man, and the lines of approach. James tried again. The zipper scraped, snagged, and held. He grimaced and pulled his hand back the way people do when pain bargains with pride. Hayes said, "Would you like help?" James nodded, then reflexively drew the bag closer, protective more than possessive. Hayes didn't reach. He waited for permission, said clearly, "Not assumed." Ruiz shifted to keep a lane open for medical access, habitually running ahead of me. Emma stood, then sat, then stood again. Lily whispered that the dog looked brave. Sam whispered that brave and scary can be neighbors. Emma agreed and told them to stay by the blanket. She glanced at James and saw not danger but depletion, the way a battery blinks before darkness. Dispatch returned nothing useful on the soft name Hayes had coaxed during greetings. No warrants, no local alerts, no trespass notes. The lack of data removed one kind of pressure, but left uncertainty untouched. Hayes angled slightly, keeping the sun from James's eye. "We can help if you're hurt," he said. James shook his head, then nodded, then shook it again, a contradiction that made human sense to anyone who has ever refused help while needing it. Rex lifted his head and drew in a long breath, attention narrowing as if he'd caught a signal carried under the day's scents. Cut grass, grill smoke, sunscreen, old canvas. Daniels noticed the shift and shortened the leash a notch, not escalating, simply matching the moment. "We'll keep this simple," he said, mostly for the crowd. The dog stilled. The park kept insisting on normal. The net snapped after a clean jumper. Ducks argued in the reeds like old friends. Ordinary life didn't leave. It stood beside the uncommon and stayed. "Almost there," Hayes said softly. James dragged the pull another inch. Inside, Hayes glimpsed canvas lining, a folded jacket, a dented canteen, and a paper sleeve's edge. Nothing shouted danger. Nothing promised safety. He held his position. Ruiz continued to watch the dog because the dog sometimes knows first. A gust rattled the maple. Sun coins fell through the leaves. Somewhere behind the gazebo, a far siren wailed and faded. James lowered his hand and closed his eyes for a beat, the way people do when their body sends a bill they can't yet pay. He opened them again, and tried once more. The snag gave. The opening widened the length of a thumb. Phones lifted higher, murmurs thick. Daniels tracked the tiny tremor in James's hand. Rex's ears flicked once. Hayes waited for a nod that would make help legitimate. Ruiz kept a quiet line to dispatch alive, brief updates that sounded like weather, steady, cautious, evaluating. Time stretched, not dramatically, just enough to make attention ache. Hayes said, "Thank you." James nodded, a small consent. The moment balanced their ordinary day on one side, unknown on the other, while the bag sat between them, ready to turn certainty into whatever came next. Crowds drifted from the courts, the gazebo and the pond, as curiosity formed a ring around the maple. Conversations thinned, footsteps slowed, strollers halted, phones hovered at chin height. Emma rose from the blanket and pulled Lily close until the child's shoulder met her hip. Sam stopped bouncing the ball and tucked it under his arm. A gust lifted napkins and blew chalk dust across the path. James set both hands on the bench and tried to stand. He made it halfway up, swayed and sat again with a grimace. He tried once more, pushing from the armrest, dragging the bag with his shoe, and nearly toppled forward. His left hand flew to his side, fingers pressing the ribs as though something inside had shifted. Air left him in a haunted sigh. "I'm not hurting anyone," he said, a plea sent to no one in particular and everyone at once. Hayes nodded. "We hear you, sir." Ruiz angled to create space without boxing the older man in. Radios crackled. Daniels took a position between Rex and the crowd, 1 foot offset, knees slightly bent, torso square to the subject. His hand slid down to the clasp. The webbing tightened. "Keep your hands visible," Daniels said. "You're safe if you stay still and follow directions." Rex stared with the focus of a spring held under thumb. The dog's chest rose and fell in measured cycles. Emma folded the blanket with nervous precision. "Lily, here," she whispered. Lily's fingers locked through her mother's. Sam moved behind the tree and peeked around it, face solemn, the way children get when they understand that adults are no longer pretending. James tried again and found his feet. He stumbled when the strap snagged his ankle. He caught himself on the bench and breathed in through his nose, out through pinched lips. He touched his side again, sweat beading his temple. "I'm not hurting anyone," he repeated. Hayes tracked the tremor in the man's wrist. He gestured a small circle with his palm, the universal sign for slow movement. "We'll help with the bag," he said. "Let me see it so we can all relax." Ruiz kept to the flank, posture angled to protect both the subject and the bystanders. Daniels lifted his radio. K9 on scene with 2 units, subject unstable, crowd dense, bag still closed. He got acknowledgement, then shortened the lead again, inches that mattered. "Sir, this is the last warning," he called. "Set the bag down. Step back. Hands where I can see them." Rex leaned forward, claws quiet against the path, back muscles gathered under coat like braided cable. A murmur rippled through the semicircle. Someone said, "Oh God." Another answered, "He's just old." A third whispered, "Please don't let the kids see anything bad." James eased the bag onto the bench, but his grip lingered, knuckles bloodless. He shook his head. "It's nothing," he said, "just things." Daniels measured the distance. He pictured lines: start point, target, intercepts. He had run this protocol across lots, alleys, storefronts, and fields. Crowds multiplied variables. "Final warning," he said. He lifted his hand to chest level, palm forward, ready to signal. Emma turned Lily slightly away. Sam squeezed the ball until his fingers white. Hayes breathed once. Ruiz set his weight. The park held very still. "On me," Daniels said. Rex stood, head high, ears trimmed for speed. The leash went taut. "Charge." The shepherd surged, paws drummed, the harness straps sang. The path flashed beneath him. Hayes shifted to create an angle. Ruiz stepped to block a sideways flinch. Phones rose like metallic flowers. Someone gasped. A scooter toppled. A stroller wheel squealed. James lifted his hands. "Please," he said, the word a thin wire between rising force. He did not move away or cover his face. He stood there, eyes fixed on the rushing animal as if staring into an old photograph. Rex closed half the distance. His lips lifted slightly, not a snarl, a readied tool. His breath churned. His feet found flawless perch. Daniels saw nothing to stop the motion. The command was given. The run had begun. The endpoint looked inevitable. Then it wasn't. Half a stride from the last push, Rex hesitated. A small hitch lived inside the momentum. His ears twitched. His head tipped a fraction. The drive stuttered. A soft sound, almost a question, escaped his throat. James gathered a word that lived behind years and pushed it out like a key kept under the tongue. "Buddy," he whispered. Rex froze. Not a dramatic skid, a full-body lock that contradicted physics. The leash jolted Daniel's palm. The dog's mouth closed. A whine rose, uncoiled and faded. His tail flickered once, twice, a restrained semaphore of recognition held under discipline. Silence dropped hard. The crowd's inhale sounded like surf. Hayes's eyes wide. Ruiz looked at Daniels, then the dog, then James, as if a hidden thread had just glinted and tried to hide again. Daniels felt the leash slacken against the power that had chosen not to use itself. He registered posture, forward, yet soft, alert, not aggressive. He rechecked the older man's hands, stance and gaze. Nothing matched the usual narrative. "Rex," he said, not a command, a name delivered like a test. Rex lowered his head and inhaled near the hem of James's coat. The dog's muscles quivered, as if memory had arrived with scent and asked to be believed. Emma realized she had stopped breathing and drew air in sharp gulps. She loosened her hold on Lily. "It's okay," she said, unsure if that was true yet wanting. Around her, people lowered their phones without deciding to. Awe displaced fear like sunlight displacing fog. James's shoulders sagged. His hand hovered above the dog's brow, then withdrew mid-air, unsure of permission. "Buddy," he said again, stronger, almost agreed. Rex whimpered, a private sound that did not belong to drills or shows. It belonged to a schedule that only two souls once shared. He shifted closer by an inch and held. Hayes swallowed. "What is this?" he muttered. Ruiz's grip opened and closed as reality redrafted itself. "Have you ever seen a bond so strong it defies orders?" Emma whispered. The question moved through the semicircle like a current, flipping a switch in every face. Wonder replaced suspicion. Curiosity rose, sharp and unstoppable. Daniels eased the leash without releasing control. "Sir," he said carefully. "What did you just say?" James did not look at the officers. He looked at the dog as if survival depended on that gaze. "Buddy," he said again, the syllables plain, heavy with many roads and miles. Rex took one more small step toward an old tree. The tail moved in a short wave. His eyes searched the lined face and found landmarks that had weathered but had not vanished. The park resumed breathing, yet the scene kept its own climate, separate from swings and pond and banners. Nothing exploded, nothing crashed. The story did not end here. It opened, and every person present felt it open. Emma blinked away tears, and Hayes and Ruiz shared a stunned glance. Sensing history pressing through a word, a name that turned danger into recognition before anyone understood why. Crowds drifted from the courts, the gazebo and the pond as curiosity formed a ring around the maple. Conversations thinned, footsteps slowed, strollers halted, phones hovered at chin height. Emma rose from the blanket and pulled Lily close until the child's shoulder met her hip. Sam stopped bouncing the ball and tucked it under his arm. A gust lifted napkins and blew chalk dust across the path. James set both hands on the bench and tried to stand. He made it halfway up, swayed and sat again with a grimace. He tried once more, pushing from the armrest, dragging the bag with his shoe, and nearly toppled forward. His left hand flew to his side, fingers pressing the ribs as though something inside had shifted. Air left him in a haunted sigh. "I'm not hurting anyone," he said, a plea sent to no one in particular and everyone at once. Hayes nodded. "We hear you, sir." Ruiz angled to create space without boxing the older man in. Radios crackled. Daniels took a position between Rex and the crowd, 1 foot offset, knees slightly bent, torso square to the subject. His hand slid down to the clasp. The webbing tightened. "Keep your hands visible," Daniels said. "You're safe if you stay still and follow directions." Rex stared with the focus of a spring held under thumb. The dog's chest rose and fell in measured cycles. Emma folded the blanket with nervous precision. "Lily, here," she whispered. Lily's fingers locked through her mother's. Sam moved behind the tree and peeked around it, face solemn, the way children get when they understand that adults are no longer pretending. James tried again and found his feet. He stumbled when the strap snagged his ankle. He caught himself on the bench and breathed in through his nose, out through pinched lips. He touched his side again, sweat beading his temple. "I'm not hurting anyone," he repeated. Hayes tracked the tremor in the man's wrist. He gestured a small circle with his palm, the universal sign for slow movement. "We'll help with the bag," he said. "Let me see it so we can all relax." Ruiz kept to the flank, posture angled to protect both the subject and the bystanders. Daniels lifted his radio. K9 on scene with 2 units, subject unstable, crowd dense, bag still closed. He got acknowledgement, then shortened the lead again, inches that mattered. "Sir, this is the last warning," he called. "Set the bag down. Step back, hands where I can see them." Rex leaned forward, claws quiet against the path. back muscles gathered under coat like braided cable. A murmur rippled through the semicircle. Someone said, "Oh God," another answered, "He's just old." A third whispered, "Please don't let the kids see anything bad." James eased the bag onto the bench, but his grip lingered. Knuckles bloodless, he shook his head. "It's nothing," he said. "Just things." Daniels measured the distance. He pictured lines, start point, target, intercepts and obstacle. He had run this protocol across lots, alleys, storefronts and fields. Crowds multiplied variables. "Final warning," he said. He lifted his hand to chest level, palm forward, ready to signal. Emma turned Lily slightly away. Sam squeezed the ball until his fingers whitened. Hayes breathed once. Ruiz set his weight. The park held very still. "On me," Daniels said. Rex stood, head high, ears trimmed for speed. The leash went taut. "Charge." The shepherd surged. Paws drummed. The harness strap sang. The path flashed beneath him. Hayes shifted to create an angle. Ruiz stepped to block a sideways flinch. Phones rose like metallic flowers. Someone gasped. A scooter toppled. A stroller wheel squealed. James lifted his hands. "Please," he said. The word a thin wire between rising forces. He did not move away or cover his face. He stood there, eyes fixed on the rushing animal as if staring into an old photograph. Rex closed half the distance. His lips lifted slightly, not a snarl, a readied tool. His breath churned. His feet found flawless perch. Daniel saw nothing to stop the motion. The command was given. The run had begun. The end point looked inevitable. Then it wasn't. Half a stride from the last push, Rex hesitated. A small hitch lived inside the momentum. His ears twitched. His head tipped a fraction. The drive stuttered. A soft sound, almost a question, escaped his throat. James gathered a word that lived behind years and pushed it out like a key kept under the tongue. "Buddy," he whispered. Rex froze. Not a dramatic skid. A full-body lock that contradicted physics. The leash jolted Daniel's palm. The dog's mouth closed. A whine rose uncoiled and faded. His tail flickered once, twice, a restrained semaphore of recognition held under discipline. Silence dropped hard. The crowd's inhale sounded like surf. Hayes's eyes wide. Ruiz looked at Daniels, then the dog, then James. As if a hidden thread had just glinted and tried to hide again. Daniels felt the leash slacken against the power that had chosen not to use itself. He registered posture forward, yet soft, alert, not aggressive. He rechecked the older man's hands, stance and gaze. Nothing matched the usual narrative. "Rex," he said. Not a command. A name delivered like a test. Rex lowered his head and inhaled near the hem of James's coat. The dog's muscles quivered, as if memory had arrived with scent and asked to be believed. Emma realized she had stopped breathing and drew air in sharp gulps. She loosened her hold on Lily. "It's okay," she said, unsure if that was true yet wanting. Around her, people lowered their phones without deciding to. Awe displaced fear like sunlight displacing fog. James's shoulders sagged. His hand hovered above the dog's brow, then withdrew midair, unsure of permission. "Buddy," he said again, stronger, almost aggrieved. Rex whimpered. A private sound that did not belong to drills or shows. It belonged to a schedule that only two souls once shared. He shifted closer by an inch and held. Hayes swallowed. "What is this?" he muttered. Ruiz's grip opened and closed as reality redrafted itself. "Have you ever seen a bond so strong it defies orders?" Emma whispered. The question moved through the semicircle like a current, flipping a switch in every face. Wonder replaced suspicion. Curiosity rose, sharp and unstoppable. Daniels eased the leash without releasing control. "Sir," he said carefully, "what did you just say?" James did not look at the officers. He looked at the dog as if survival depended on that gaze. "Buddy," he said again. The syllables plain, heavy with many roads and miles. Rex took one more small step toward an old tree. The tail moved in a short wave. His eyes searched the lined face and found landmarks that had weathered but had not vanished. The park resumed breathing, yet the scene kept its own climate, separate from swings and pond and banners. Nothing exploded, nothing crashed. The story did not end here. It opened, and every person present felt it open. Emma blinked away tears, and Hayes and Ruiz shared a stunned glance. Sensing history pressing through a word, A name that turned danger into recognition before anyone understood why. Rex eased closer, nose working through layers of dust, soap, cotton, and sunlight baked into the threadbare coat. The leash drew a line between duty and something tender that wanted to cross. His tail made a small, careful sweep, not for show, just a quiet metronome of memory trying to keep time. James stood still, shoulders squared by habit, eyes wet. He breathed like a man stepping onto a bridge he once built himself. "Buddy, it's me," he said, voice hushed yet steady. A key turned inside a locked room that still remembered its door. Officer Daniels felt the harness tug, an insistence that didn't belong to aggression. He tightened his grip and braced. Protocol stacked inside his head, clean and orderly, but the dog's posture didn't match any slide he had studied. Hayes tracked the angle from bench to path. Ruiz watched the edges, palms open, ready to block without adding heat. Emma slid a foot, sheltering Lily while Sam peeked around her hip, eyes wide. Rex inhaled again, deeper, gathering the scent living beneath grass, grills, and sunscreen. He stepped until his chest touched James's knee, then paused, searching worn fabric like a map. The faint wag returned, 2 beats, then 3. Daniels gave a short correction. The dog absorbed it without retreat. Authority met recognition and found no easy winner. James's hand rose, stopped midair, hovered, shook, then descended until fingers brushed fur. Heat met skin. A tremor ran through both. Rex leaned in, not pushing, simply offering weight. His head turned, cheek pressing the old coat. Eyes half closing as though hearing a song from a summer nobody believed would end. James swallowed. A tear cut a clean track through grit. He didn't wipe it away. The crowd murmured, voices soft and layered. "He knows him," someone breathed. Lily leaned toward Sam and whispered, "That dog knows him." Sam nodded, solemn. A bicyclist stopped, one shoe clipped out, balanced like a statue. Phones drifted lower, not because the moment mattered less, but because it suddenly felt private. Daniels frowned at the leash. "Rex," he said, tone neutral, a mild recall that usually brought instant response. The dog stilled, ears flicking, then returned his focus to James. Another step, gentle, closing the last inch. His tail wagged again, a restrained arc belonging to reunions tempered by uncertainty. Hayes met Ruiz's glance. The younger officer tilted his chin toward the dog, silently asking whether any of this matched experience. Ruiz exhaled. "Something's here," he said under breath. Not a conclusion, an observation with humility. Emma's chest loosened. She eased her hold on Lily, though her hand stayed ready. James lowered onto the bench with a careful bend, never breaking contact. Rex adjusted with him, forepaws close, shoulders squared, head landing on denim like a memory putting itself to bed. James's other hand found the base of the ear and scratched lightly, exactly where a handler would after drills, praise tucked into touch. "Good boy," he whispered. Gratitude more than command. Daniels felt the ground tilt. Not physically, training kept joints set and balance intact, but ethically, emotionally, historically. He often told rookies that dogs live in the present, yet the present stretched backward now, carrying roads and dust. He tested the leash again. It held slack. He disliked the mysteries surrounding working animals. He disliked this one less, because it felt beautiful. "Sir," Hayes said to James, keeping his tone soft, "do you know this canine?" James's mouth opened and closed before sound arrived. "Yes," he said, and then more surely, "I knew him when he was young." A tremor moved through the semicircle. It wasn't fear, it was relief, slipping past doubt. Rex huffed, a small satisfied sound living nowhere but here. He set his muzzle on James's thigh, breath warmed, worn denim. His eyes watched upward, anchoring on a face time had sanded but not erased. James let out a fragile laugh that was half sob, half sunrise. He whispered a string of small phrases, unimportant to anyone outside the shade, vital to the only listener who mattered. Rex's ear twitched at each familiar syllable, cataloging home. Ruiz radioed a status update that avoided speculation. Subject seated, K9 calm, physical contact observed, crowd controlled, he said, letting command measure the data while hearts did their separate arithmetic. Hayes kept sightlines open. Emma checked the children, then allowed them to look because they wanted tenderness as witnesses. Only for a moment, she told them. They nodded, reverent. Daniels crouched, bringing his eyes level with Rex. "Partner," he said gently. "On me." The dog did not rise. He acknowledged the voice with a flick, then returned attention to James. Daniels had seen stubbornness, distraction, and fatigue. This wasn't any. It felt like a duty older than the bat. James slid his hand to the collar, fingers tracing stitching he recognized with a jolt. Different hardware, same position, same purpose. He swallowed. "Buddy, it's me," he said again, not louder, simply clearer, as if speaking into a radio that had regained signal. Rex's tail picked up its measured sweep, a calm pendulum counting seconds no clock could hold. A boy near the front asked, "Is he allowed to do that?" A parent hushed him. The question hung anyway, honest and good. "Rules meet life in parks as surely as in classrooms." Hayes answered without turning. "We're evaluating," he said, true if incomplete. James lifted the bag's flap with his free hand and pulled out a faded ball, rubber scuffed to a dull mat. He rolled it across his palm, and smiled in disbelief because he hadn't known it was there until the zipper finally gave. He held it up. Rex's ears rose, not with frantic hunger, but with recognition distilled to essence. The shepherd didn't break position. He waited, muscles quiet, eyes bright as a lantern covered by a careful hand. "Not here," Daniels said automatically, protective of safety, aware of optics, yet moved despite himself. James nodded, accepting boundaries without surrendering the moment. He tucked the ball back, slow, letting Rex see. "Later," he promised. A thin vow carrying surprising weight. Wind shifted, grill smoke drifted, a blue jay scolded from a branch. Ordinary life reasserted itself like a chorus behind a solo. Yet the solo held center. The dog's head on the man's lap spelled a sentence everyone could read: chosen, remembered, safe. Lily tugged Emma's sleeve. "Would you know me if we didn't see each other for a long time?" she asked. Emma kissed her hair. "Always," she said, simple and absolute. She looked at faces transformed by gentleness and felt the day change shape. Hayes kept scanning while giving space to stillness. Ruiz stepped toward a couple creeping closer with lenses extended, and lifted a hand, not harsh, just firm. They stopped, chastened, then nodded appreciation and retreated a pace. Respect was learned quickly when awe took root. Daniels finally spoke the thought that had been gathering like distant thunder. "We need to understand this," he said to Hayes, and Ruiz low. "But we shouldn't break it." He addressed James. "Sir, keep your hands visible and stay seated. You can keep touching him. We're not going to interfere." The concession felt radical, though it cost nothing except pride. Everyone felt history turn, gentle and irrevocable, right there in sunlight today. Ruiz pressed his shoulder mic and pivoted enough to keep the bench in sight. "Control Unit 3-1, expedite background on subject identifying as James Carter, male, late 60s, gray hair, blue jacket, canvas bag, seated by the North Maple, K9 on scene shows a typical recognition. Request liaison to check military records." He spoke evenly as if tone could keep the park from tilting. Static breathed, then cleared. "Copy 3-1. Running local and state, military liaison pinged." Hayes stood near James, posture loose, hands visible. Daniels hovered by Rex, reading tiny signals, ears soft, tail creating a quiet sweep, breath steady. The dog's head still rested on James's lap. James kept one palm at the base of the neck, not holding, just promising he would not vanish again. Emma wiped a tear with the heel of her hand and smiled at her own reaction. Lily leaned into her side. Sam loosened his grip on the ball. Phones lowered as if privacy had grown roots around the pair. Dispatch returned. "No active warrants, no local flags," the voice said. "Stand by for additional." The jogger slowed and removed earbuds. The tension that had filled every gap began to leak away, replaced by a hush that felt expectant rather than afraid. 3-1, dispatch came back, tone altered by discovery. "We show a historical file. Subject James Nathan Carter, prior Army service. Listed as a K9 handler attached to a rote clearance element overseas. 15 years ago, the last contact was during an incident involving multiple explosions near a convoy halt. Records suggest he was presumed deceased. Later notation indicates a hospital intake stateside about 10 months after that event, with traumatic brain injury, memory impairment, and no confirmed family. Hayes let his shoulders sink a fraction. Daniels absorbed it in silence, then looked at the dog again and found nothing surprising in the way Rex stayed. Ruiz repeated the essentials for the log. Copy, presumed dead, later located with brain injury, unstable housing. Rex exhaled as if truth had loosened something caught in his chest. James stared at the middle distance, eyes bright, mouth forming shapes without sound. He rubbed the dog's shoulder in small circles that carried 1,000 nights of quiet thank. Control, Ruiz added, check for any reference to a canine assigned to Carter. A pause, then, stand by. 3-1 liaison confirms the canine attached to Carter survived the convoy incident, was rehabilitated, transferred stateside, retrained, and later certified for domestic law enforcement. The current registry shows the call name Rex with your department, handler of record, Officer Daniel. Daniels blinked and almost laughed at the precision of the fact. He touched the back strap of the harness and felt the hum of the animal's calm resolve. Copy, he said, but the word meant more than receipt. It meant acceptance. People eased back one step, making room. Emma pressed her fingers to her lips and looked at Lily and Sam. He wasn't a stranger, she whispered. Lily nodded, solemn. Hayes crouched to James's level. Sir, he said softly, we're getting information that you served with a dog overseas, were hurt, and later listed as deceased, before being found alive with memory loss. Does that sound right? James drew a slow breath. There was a road, he said. Heat, 3 black, a wall that tried to fold. I remember covering him. After that, light in pieces. He tapped his temple gently. Names left, some returned. Ruiz kept it simple. The dog lived. He was retrained. He works with us now. His name is Rex. He didn't need to add what everyone could see. The animal had decided where he belonged. Daniels addressed James directly. If you're okay, sir, I'd like to keep him right here while we handle the paperwork. It came out like a request and a promise. James nodded, eyes never leaving Rex. Buddy, it's me, he whispered, and the dog's tail answered without fanfare. A woman sniffed. A man cleared his throat and pretended to study the sky. The ice cream vendor set down his tongs and wiped his face. Ruiz keyed again. Control, scene calm. Request veteran services and a social worker to our location. Advise that a reunification appears to be in progress. Copy, dispatch said, voice warmer. Resources en route. Units acknowledged the unique situation calmly. Ordinary sound returned, rearranged stroller wheels, a jay scolding from the maple, grill smoke drifting like a small flag. The energy that had been coiled inside the leash now felt like it lived inside the word home. Hayes spoke with practical kindness. We'll bring medical to you, he told James. No pressure, they'll check your ribs, make sure you're steady. We'll also start a record search to correct your status and connect support. Thank you, James said. The syllables landed with the weight of years. Rex shifted his head and let more of his skull rest on James's thigh, a careful surrender. Daniels allowed another inch of slack. He turned to the crowd. Folks, thank you for staying calm. Please give them space. People obeyed without resentment. Emma hugged Lily and Sam at once. Remember this, she whispered. Sometimes life loses your file. Love keeps its own. Ruiz's mobile terminal pinged. He read a note appended by the liaison. There's an entry from a clinic, he told Hayes and Daniels, voice quiet. It says he apologized for forgetting names and always remembered a dog. He didn't read the last sentence, that he thanked the nurse every time she set a water dish near his chair, even when no animal waited there. Hayes stood and scanned the park, then looked back and decided nothing needed fixing. No cuffs, he said, no more commands. We treat this like a family scene. Daniels nodded, agreed. He rested his free hand on Rex's shoulder, and felt the answering warmth. Good boy, he said, almost under his breath, not as handler to subordinate, but as partner to partner. Neighbors relaxed. A bicyclist clipped his shoe back in and rolled away, smiling. James kept stroking the fur in slow line. I thought you were gone, he murmured, then let the sentence finish itself in silence. Tears stood but did not fall. His body settled by degrees, each breath anchoring him in the present that had come to meet him halfway. Rex closed his eyes and released a low sound that lived nowhere, except at the end of long roads. The leash hung with slack that once would have been unthinkable. No one felt threatened. Everyone felt changed. "Control," Ruiz said. "One more time. Be advised, officers are lowering posture. We'll maintain the perimeter until support arrives." "This is no longer an enforcement situation. It's care." "Affirmative," dispatch replied. "And 3-1, Ruiz answered. "For what it's worth," the dispatcher added. "Tell them welcome home." Ruiz looked at Hayes and Daniels, then at James and the shepherd, and decided the message had already arrived. It was in the way Emma stood with her children, in the way the crowd gave space, in the patience of a town that had just watched a man step out from between two dates and take his name back, in sunlight, with a dog who had never truly let it go. James lowered himself onto the grass as if the ground itself were an old friend that had waited through many silent years. Rex curled against his hip without being asked, fitting his body along the curve of a life he already understood. Sun warmed the blades. A thin breeze braided clover scent with charcoal from the carts by the path. Children whispered as though they had wandered into a chapel. "I remember the night lanes," James murmured, voice soft enough to respect the distance between memory and today. "Stars like nails, sand hisses against the tires. You moved ahead of the convoy like a promise." Rex huffed once, a small sound that landed exactly where it belonged. James's fingers traveled the fur along the shoulder, mapping familiar ridges that time had not erased. "We shared rations when the schedule broke," he said. "You hated raisins, loved the crunch." Rex licked his hand with careful precision as if reading a line written on skin. His tail brushed the grass, restrained and steady. Officer Hayes stood a few steps away and shook his head, wonder outrunning caution. "This is unreal," he muttered, not to anyone in particular, simply to the day itself. Ruiz kept the perimeter loose. Daniels watched with an expression that belonged more to family photos than training manuals. James leaned back on one forearm and let the other rest across Rex's chest, feeling the engine of that generous heart. "We waited out storms under canvas," he whispered. "You hated thunder until I taught you its patterns. I counted between flashes and sound until fear learned math." Rex breathed deeper, answering with quiet acceptance. The leash lay slack like a forgotten sentence. Nearby, Emma folded the blanket and didn't sit. She wanted to stand witness. Lily slid her hand into Sam's and squeezed. More people drifted toward the radius without breaching. They held their phones higher then lower, learning to let their eyes do the work. The vendor from the cart brought a bowl of water and set it near, retreating with an awkward grin that made everything feel more human. Rex lifted his head only long enough to drink, then returned it to James's thigh as if the pause had been an interruption he had politely tolerated. James laughed under his breath. "The alley with the blue door," he said. "You pointed before I saw. Saved me 2 steps and 10 years of sleep." He rubbed the ear base in patient circles. "The old woman who fed you scraps through the fence. You never barked at her. You understood kindness before I did." A hush replied, the kind of silence that gathers when strangers collectively agree not to ruin something luminous. Hayes looked around and saw the town as if for the first time, faces soft, shoulders lowered, suspicion evaporating into simple relief. He spoke to no one and everyone. "When was the last time you saw loyalty this unbreakable?" A few people answered with breath that became laughter before it needed words. Emma wiped her eyes and let the children see the tears, because some days instruct better than classrooms. Rex nudged the coat pocket. James understood, opened it and withdrew the scuffed ball. Daniels took one step forward and stopped himself. "Go on," he said gently. "Just keep it small." James rolled the ball across the grass. Rex followed with a slow trot. No yank, no show, just deliberation. Picked it up and returned to place it in James's palm like a ritual that had paused rather than ended. The crowd exhaled as if a withheld breath had finally been granted back. They stayed like that, the world narrowing until it contained only the weight of a head against a leg, the rhythm of a breath against a wrist, and the light stitch of a tail across green. James talked about patrols that lasted until colors dissolved, about the final watch before sunrise when hope and fatigue negotiated terms, about the taste of dust that never quite left. He mentioned the medic who hummed tunes during long drives, the mechanic who taught him to listen to engines through a socket pressed against the block, and the chaplain who passed out peppermints that tasted like home. A girl near the front lowered her phone entirely and held both hands together at her chest. A man in a business shirt took off his tie without noticing. Somewhere a basketball thumped and then went quiet. Birds reclaimed the tree above them and sang an ordinary melody that somehow sounded like a blessing. Daniels crouched, met Rex's eyes and saw history looking back without accusation. "Good boy," he said, and meant the phrase with a depth that startled him. He had brought the dog to scenes of grief, stubbornness, heat, arguments, nights along riverbanks, sheds and lots. He had never brought him to this, where a past returned and asked to sit down in the present without drama. He gave the leash another inch because control was now measured by grade. James's voice thinned with effort, then steadied. "You waited at the cot," he said, "even when I was elsewhere. You slept with one paw touching the frame." He traced a small circle on the dog's chest. "I forgot faces," he confessed, the honesty unvarnished, "but never the sound you made when you settled for the night. That note is home." Rex answered with that exact note, a soft exhale shaped like trust. People looked at each other with a kind of permission, as if the day had allowed them to be tender without asking who was watching. Hayes rubbed his jaw and let his hands drop to his sides. Ruiz turned away for a second to gather himself and then returned, posture open. Emma took a step forward then stopped, respecting the boundary she could now feel without tape or rope. The sun slid an inch, shadows tucked closer to shoes. Someone from Veteran Services entered the park and paused, assessing without intrusion. A medic waited near the path, reading the scene correctly, nothing broken that touch could not begin to mend. The medic stayed back, reading the room with quiet respect. James placed his forehead lightly against Rex's and closed his eyes. The dog did not move. The quiet filled with a language even those without the backstory could understand. A woman whispered, "Please let them keep him," as if the cosmos needed to be informed of the only right answer. Another whispered back, "They belong," and the words sounded like a prayer finishing its own amen. A breeze picked up and lifted a corner of the blanket Emma had folded. She set her shoe on it and smiled at the domesticity tucked inside the spectacle. Life, undramatic and sturdy, was already making a home around the miracle. The town would remember headlines, video and quotes. It would also remember the bowl of water, the ball returned to a palm, and the officer who chose patience over posture. James breathed in, then out, and gave the ball another short roll. Rex returned it with the same unhurried certainty. Sunlight rested on both like a benediction that had finally found its mark. Phones rose again, this time to share something that might grow goodness instead of fear. Children would show friends, neighbors would text neighbors, strangers would cry in kitchens and pretend onions were involved. James looked up at Hayes, at Ruiz, at Daniels, and found steady face. He spoke to the dog, to the officers, to the watching town, and to whoever might need the reminder later. "We made it," he said. Rex leaned harder, as if to underline the sentence. The day agreed without argument, and the circle around them held, not as a cage but as a gentle ring where loyalty could be seen doing its simple, astonishing work. Sirens faded as two unmarked SUVs rolled to the curb by the crosswalk. Supervisors stepped out with the particular gravity people carry when policy might collide with mercy. The crowd opened a path without being asked. James sat on the grass, one hand curved around Rex's chest, the other holding a scuffed ball, like proof that the day could still be simple. Daniels stood near, calm and attentive. A captain surveyed the scene, then conferred with a K-9 lieutenant, a legal advisor, and a city risk liaison. Questions came in low voices. Is the animal deployed? Has the handler issued commands? What do guidelines say about reassignment? Does a prior service bond justify a transfer? Where does liability sit if emotions outrun rules? They spoke in clauses that tried to cage something that refused to live in a cage. Hayes watched steadily. Ruiz gave clipped updates and held a patient perimeter. Emma drew Lily and Sam close, whispering that adults sometimes need a minute to remember what matters. People at the lawn's edge lowered their phones, afraid a flash might jar loose the fragile peace forming around man and dog. The captain stepped forward and introduced herself plainly. She crouched near Daniels. Status: Daniels kept his voice even. K-9 calm. Subject identified as James Carter, a former Army handler presumed deceased after a mission. Records indicate this dog was rescued, retrained and certified for police work years later. Recognition appears mutual. No threat indicators. Crowd cooperative. The legal advisor glanced at the slack leash. The dog is a departmental asset, he said quietly. Decisions require documentation. The K9 lieutenant nodded, not unkindly. True, he replied. However, refusal to act on command in the presence of a prior handler may signal a welfare factor beyond routine deployment. That matters. James heard. He knelt beside Rex and whispered names of days he remembered. Morning drills, evening throws, sandstorms that rattled foil on windows, the warm silence after hard work. Rex leaned against him, tail making small steady arcs like a metronome keeping time with relief. The ball rested, waiting. Officer Daniels, the captain asked, is your assessment that safety holds if they remain together? Daniels looked at Rex, then at the man whose voice had turned an order into a reunion. Yes, he said, he's made his choice. The sentence moved through the air like a spark that refused to go out. The lieutenant waited. Can your unit function without Rex today? Daniels nodded. We'll cover the shift. I'll take responsibility for the report. A city official approached with a lanyard and suggested a temporary hold pending review. Hayes lifted a palm, not antagonistic, merely human. Look at them, he said. The official did, swallowed, and stepped back. Rex adjusted until his head lay across James's thigh. A hush gathered again. The captain's face softened. She signaled the commander who had arrived on foot, hat tucked under an arm, expression open. He took in the map. Officers relaxed, community attentive, sunlight generous, history reclaiming something paperwork had misplaced. The commander knelt, bringing authority to ground level. He spoke to James as if they were alone. Sir, he said, gentle and clear, we're not taking him, he's yours. The words landed like shade after heat. James closed his eyes, exhaled, and bent over Rex's neck. His shoulders shook once, then steadied. Cheers erupted from every side, loud enough to startle a jay from the maple, and release laughter that sounded like relief finally allowed to make noise. Phones lifted, not to sensationalize but to remember. A vendor clanged a spatula against his grill and whooped. Children bounced. Strangers hugged. Neighbors cheered. Daniels rubbed Rex's shoulder and whispered, "Go on, buddy." The dog rose, trotted a small circle, then returned and leaned the full truth of his weight into James's chest. Hayes swiped both cheeks and looked elsewhere, as if wind had thrown grit into his eyes. Ruiz laughed once, short and full, and radioed that posture had shifted from enforcement to care. Veteran Services arrived with a counselor carrying a folder and a kindness that existed beyond any bag. She spoke to James about housing, medical care, records correction, and help that does not evaporate after a headline. He listened, nodded, and kept a hand on fur like a compass, finally pointing north. She promised to shepherd paperwork through offices that sometimes forget names. He said thank you without theatrics, because gratitude grows quiet when it becomes real. The K9 lieutenant approached Daniels. We'll need to process equipment, he said, almost apologetic. Vest, tracker, chain of custody. Daniels considered the harness and shook his head. He keeps the collar, he replied. Symbolic ownership started long before our inventory did. The lieutenant smiled. I'll write that as continuity of training, he said, and meant it. Emma crouched by her kids. What would you do to keep a bond this strong? She asked softly, turning the day into a mirror people could carry home. Lily answered, anything that doesn't harm. Sam added, everything that helps. Around them, neighbors repeated the question, trying it on like a promise. A reporter edged forward, then stopped at the sight of James pressing his forehead to Rex's. Instead of shouting questions, she recorded the quiet and let the moment speak. The captain thanked everyone for their patience, and asked for space while the simple steps were concluded. People complied because celebration can be orderly when respect leads it. The medical checked James. Bruising striped his ribs. His shoulder felt tight. He needed water, rest, and evaluation. They offered transport. He agreed on one condition. Rex rode with him. The commander smiled. Already arranged. The medic opened the side door of the van while neighbors formed an impromptu aisle, clapping as the pair stood and walked forward together. At the curb, Daniels unclipped the leash. No more lines, he said. Only a promise. James accepted the coiled strap anyway, not as a restraint but as a keepsake. He tucked it into the bag beside the rubber ball. Rex hopped inside the vehicle and settled, eyes never leaving the man who followed. As the doors closed, sunlight pooled across the hood. The town exhaled in one body. Emma hugged her kids and whispered, remember, rules matter, and love teaches rules how to serve. Hayes shook the commander's hand. Ruiz filed a last line to dispatch. Scene resolved. Community uplifted. The van rolled away slowly, turning at the corner where the mural showed champions lifting a trophy. Applause trailed like a ribbon. On the grass the imprint where they had sat remained, a soft oval that would fade by dusk, leaving behind a story that would. 2 quiet weeks redrew the edges of James's life. The veteran's home sat 3 blocks from the park, a square brick building with a small yard and a maple waiting for autumn. Inside, a nurse guided him past a bulletin board of Polaroids and a handwritten schedule: breakfast at 8, laundry on Tuesday, game night on Friday. Rex paced beside him, ears easy, tail low, eyes bright. A bowl waited near the bed. A folded blanket lay at the foot, stitched with a small star. James touched the fabric, smiled, and said thank you to a room that finally answered back. Routine arrived like a careful friend. A physician adjusted medications. A physical therapist showed how to lift without lifting pain. A counselor sat on the porch and asked questions that left space for truth. Rex learned the hallways in one afternoon and the yard by evening. He mapped every breeze and creak. When memory wobbled, he pressed his shoulder to James's shin until the world steadied. Neighbors noted. A baker brought warm rolls. A mechanic tuned an old fan so it hummed instead of rattling. Children knocked and asked to toss a ball. James said yes, one at a time, gentle throws only. Emma arrived with Lily and Sam, carrying tennis balls and a hand-drawn card that pictured a man and a dog. Lily wrote, "Thank you for being brave." Sam printed, "Good boys get good homes." They sat on the steps while James told a short story about a desert night when a fox crossed camp, and Rex watched without barking because some things only pass by. The children listened, leaving a bag of treats on the mat. Packages followed, a leash braided by a scout troop, a patch reading "Once a team, always a team." A note from a veteran 2 states away: "You helped me remember who I am." The manager taped it near the door so it greeted them after walks. The yard became theirs. The groundskeeper mowed a narrow oval track and set a low bench at the bend. Each morning James rolled the ball twice, then rested a while. Rex returned it with deliberate steps, placing it in a waiting palm like a ritual recovered from sleep. News traveled. A local paper ran a photograph from the park. A regional station aired a quiet interview with Officer Daniels, who spoke about listening when a dog tells you the truth. The clip reached national feeds and found tired eyes. Headlines repeated in kitchens, buses and break rooms. Canine reunites with lost handler in tearful moment. Comments stacked beneath the video. "Welcome home. I needed this. Thank you for reminding me what matters." The home adjusted around the attention without letting it swallow the pace. Volunteers planted marigolds. A barber set up on the porch and trimmed hair while Rex supervised from the shade. The counselor kept appointments gently. Not every day was easy. Sometimes James woke unsure which country owned the sky. On those days Rex guided him back with their ritual. Touch collar, count to 5, breathe, speak one true sentence about the present. Window, maple, porch, friend. A reporter asked for a studio appearance. The manager declined and proposed a quieter visit. The crew came on a Tuesday, filmed from the steps, and left a basket with a note: "Policies are tools, not masters." Daniels visited after shifts, out of uniform, carrying a tug toy and fresh treats. He sat on the grass and let Rex The shepherd greeted him with affection, then returned to James, making his answer clear. Daniels completed the transfer paperwork and left a space on the roster where a name had lived. One Saturday, the town held a small ceremony at the park. The commander thanked the crowd for its patience. Hayes spoke about choosing calm over posture. Ruiz praised neighbors who gave space when it counted. Daniels handed James a new collar embossed with a small star. The old one went on a shelf like a relic. A church group brought lemonade and children lined up to touch the tag and make quiet wishes. The maple tossed cool shade across sneakers and blankets, and for a moment, the town breathed in a single rhythm. Evenings settled into a cadence. James and Rex followed the oval path, sat on the bench and watched porch lights bloom along the block. Crickets tuned their tiny instruments. The counselor waved once. The physician slowed at the gate to say goodnight. The world did not turn softer by accident. People chose softness because the story reminded them. The clip kept looping, pulling small kindnesses into orbit. Someone paid for a stranger's lunch. Someone left dog food on the step. A class sent drawings of two figures under a tree with captions that spelled home correctly every time. Medical care did quite well. Bruises faded. Balance returned. The brace learned to rest in a drawer. James wrote memories in a blue spiral notebook, small so they could live somewhere safer than the back of his mind. Each entry ended with a short tally. Today we are here. Rex received a wellness exam, a new tag and a collar that fit like a good scent. The vet pronounced him sound, and wrote a note that made the room cheer. Cleared for many more walks. The tag chimed softly whenever he shook his coat, a small bell that said stay near. A teacher asked James to speak about teamwork. He declined a microphone but sent a message for the morning announcements. Loyalty is a practice, not a feeling. The class wrote back with thanks and an invitation to the spring fair. On a clear evening, a photographer returned for one last picture. She framed the bench, the maple, the track, and the angle of two heads resting close. No drama, only peace. Under the image, a caption read, "Home found them in broad daylight. Time gathered everything without rushing." The first leaf turned red. The ramp felt like part of the house. The bowl by the door acquired a chip shaped like a smile. Deliveries shifted to match nap hours. One night, James woke from a sharp dream and sat up too fast. Rex placed a paw across his ankle and waited. James counted to 5, touched the collar and whispered, "We are here." The dark softened, then cleared. Morning rinsed the last fragments away. Headlines still bounced through the world, but the sound grew rounder, less bright, like an echo choosing to become a lullaby. Canine reunites with lost handler in tearful moment. Had done its job. Ordinary life would do the rest. If this story has reached you on a bus, in a kitchen or at a desk between tasks, let it finish the circuit by sparking one good thing. Share this story of loyalty and love, because every hero, human or dog, deserves a home. Send it to a friend who needs a reason to believe in quiet miracle. Leave a kind comment under the next clip that tries to lift someone. Check on a neighbor. Visit a shelter. Call a veteran. Choose softness when rules forget who they serve. Inspire someone today.